Have you ever looked in the mirror after a breakup and wondered, not, why did she leave, but where did I go? It's a haunting thought, isn't it? To realize that somewhere between falling in love and falling apart, you stopped being the man you once were. You started walking on eggshells, saying yes when your gut screamed no, giving more, asking less, and calling that compromise when really it was slow erosion. And maybe you never saw it happening. Maybe you just wanted to love her right, to protect, to provide, to pour yourself into something real. But here's the thing no one tells you, especially not in the noise of modern advice. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear. Now pause for a moment. This video, it's not about blaming women. It's not about pretending men are victims. It's about something far more important. Something every Stoic knew. The strength of a man is measured not in how loudly he speaks, but in how deeply he knows himself, and how clearly he can see what's quietly destroying him. Seneca once said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." And brothers, many of us are suffering unnecessarily in our relationships, not because love is a lie, but because we forgot to love ourselves with the same devotion we offer others. In today's video, we're not here to vent. We're here to awaken. We'll uncover the 5 most common mistakes men make in love, and we'll approach them not with shame, but with Stoic clarity. We're going to talk about validation, emotional suppression, overgiving, red flags, and the dangerous illusion of making her your purpose. And each one is a lesson, a mirror, a chance to come back to yourself. Because this isn't about saving a relationship, it's about saving your soul. If you've ever felt like you've lost your power in love, I want you to stay with me. If you value strength, depth, and discipline, not as a mask, but as a foundation, then this is your space. This is your path. So if this message speaks to something in you, do me a quiet favor. Tap that like button, subscribe to Stoic now, and share this with a brother who might be fighting the same silent war. Take a breath, because what we're about to walk through could change not just your relationships, but your life. Let's begin. Number 1. Seeking validation instead of respect. Picture this. A man stands at the edge of his own dignity, hoping she'll notice. He texts first, every time. He over-explains when she grows distant. He rewrites his words 10 times to sound less needy. Not because he's weak, but because somewhere deep down, he believes love must be earned by shrinking. And maybe that man is someone you know. Or maybe he's you. One of the most common mistakes men make in relationships isn't what they say. It's what they silently surrender. The need for validation is subtle, but it runs deep. It whispers, if I just do more, say it better, stay agreeable, she'll stay. She'll see my worth. But what's the cost? Respect fades. Attraction withers. And worst of all, a man forgets how to trust his own voice. Now let's be clear, wanting to be appreciated is human. We all want to feel seen, to feel chosen. But when your peace hinges on how someone else perceives you, you've already lost yourself. The Stoics understood this with startling clarity. Epictetus wrote, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because chasing approval is a form of slavery. It makes you a puppet to other people's preferences. And in love, that's fatal. You become overly accommodating. You ignore your own boundaries. You say yes when you should pause. You lower your standards, thinking it's compromise, when really, it's abandonment of self. I once knew a man, we'll call him Michael. Strong, smart, loyal to the core. He fell hard for a woman who was magnetic, mysterious, unpredictable. And at first, he felt lucky, like he'd caught something rare. But within months, he was doing emotional backflips, changing his schedule to match hers, apologizing for things he didn't do, avoiding difficult conversations so she wouldn't pull away, all in the name of keeping the peace. He didn't see it then, but his actions weren't building connection. They were breeding quiet contempt. Because when you teach someone that your boundaries are flexible, they'll keep testing the line until there is none. And when she eventually left, Michael was devastated, but not surprised. Deep down, he knew. He knew he had been more concerned with being liked than being respected, more focused on not losing her than not losing himself. This is where Stoic thought brings us back to sanity. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts are colored by fear, fear of being alone, fear of disapproval, fear of rejection, then your soul will bend to those shades. Instead, what if your first question wasn't, does she like me? But do I respect how I'm showing up right now? Because here's a truth many men learn too late. A woman may admire your devotion, but she'll only desire your presence if it carries self-respect. Not arrogance, not indifference, just a quiet, grounded certainty that says, I don't need you to like me to be at peace with myself. When you stop needing validation, something radical happens. You become free. Free to speak honestly, even when it risks disagreement. Free to walk away from dynamics that dishonor your worth. Free to give love without bargaining for it in return. And ironically, that's when people begin to respect you most. It's counterintuitive, I know. But think about the men you admire. The ones whose presence calms the room, not by loudness, but by clarity. They don't chase attention. They don't mold themselves for approval. They move with integrity. And because they need nothing, people are drawn to them. That's the Stoic power, detachment, not in the cold sense of apathy, but in the wise sense of inner anchoring. So how do you begin shifting out of the trap of validation? First, track your patterns. When do you overcommunicate just to get a response? When do you soften your truth to avoid disapproval? Write those moments down. They're not failures. They're feedback. Second, reconnect with your values. Not hers. Not what society says makes a good man. Yours. Ask, what virtues matter most to me? Honesty, patience, strength, humor, faithfulness. And am I living them in this relationship? Third, practice silence. Yes, silence. The next time you feel the urge to over-explain, to double text, to fix her mood, pause. Let the discomfort pass. Let your restraint speak louder than your words. That's emotional discipline. And that's respect for her and for you. Remember, love built on performance is not love. It's theater. And you weren't made to play a role. You were made to live in truth. As Seneca reminded us, until we have begun to go without them, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are. Approval is one of those things. What you really need is clarity. What you truly deserve is peace. And what you must reclaim before any woman can truly love you is your own respect. Not because she told you so, but because you decided it was time. Number 2, suppressing emotions instead of mastering them. They say a man must be strong, stoic, unshaken, but somewhere along the way, we confused stoicism with silence. We mistook mastery for numbness, and we started believing the biggest lie we were ever told, that real men don't feel. So we hold it in. The frustration at work, the hurt from an argument, the quiet ache of feeling misunderstood. We compress it, swallow it, dress it up in a smile, or bury it under sarcasm. We put on the armor of indifference and call it control. But deep down we know better. Because that armor? It rusts. It gets heavy. And what we refuse to face doesn't disappear. It waits. In the shadows of our mind, in the tension of our body, in the cracks of our relationships. And then, when we least expect it, it explodes. A calm man suddenly rages. A loving man grows distant. A man full of potential becomes paralyzed by the very emotions he thought he had conquered. This isn't strength. It's surrender, hidden behind the mask of toughness. Now here's the irony. The ancient Stoics never asked us to suppress emotion. They asked us to observe it, to understand it, to master it, not by avoiding the storm, but by standing inside it with presence and reason. Marcus Aurelius didn't say, feel nothing. He said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That includes the storms inside you. Imagine your emotions as fire. Left unattended, it burns the house down. But with understanding, with boundaries, that same fire warms your home, cooks your food, fuels your life. The man who bottles his pain will one day burst. But the man who meets his anger with awareness, his grief with breath, his sadness with reflection, that man becomes dangerous in the best way possible. Not because he is emotionless, but because he is unshaken by emotion. I remember a client, let's call him Eli. On the outside, he had it all together. Stoic posture, measured voice, no outbursts, no drama. But his relationship was cracking. His partner said she felt unseen, unheard. You never let me in, she said. It's like hugging a statue. Eli wasn't cruel. He wasn't neglectful. He was frozen. He had mistaken emotional silence for stoic control. But when we looked closer, what we found was fear. Fear of being vulnerable. fear of being judged, fear of being overwhelmed by what might surface if he finally opened that sealed door inside. So we began the work, not of speaking more, but of speaking honestly, journaling nightly, as Marcus Aurelius once did, sitting with difficult memories, not fixing them, just witnessing them, breathing through discomfort, letting the grief come like a wave, and letting it go the same way. Weeks passed, then months, and one day, Eli said something I'll never forget. I didn't realize how numb I'd become. But now that I feel again, I'm finally alive. That's what Stoicism truly invites us into. Not a life without feeling, but a life where feelings no longer control us. You see, when you suppress emotion, you give it power over your nervous system, your decisions, your relationships. But when you acknowledge emotion without judgment, you transmute it into wisdom. The Stoics practiced this through daily reflection. Marcus, even as an emperor, would end his day asking, where did I act out of impulse? Where was I ruled by fear, or anger, or desire? This wasn't weakness. It was a daily discipline, a mirror held up to the soul. And we can do the same. Start with stillness. Each evening, take 5 minutes. Ask yourself, what emotion visited me today? How did I respond to it? Was I reactive or reflective? Write it down. Don't edit it. Don't judge it. Just notice. Then ask, what did that emotion want to teach me? Because every feeling is a message. Anger says, a boundary was crossed. Sadness says, something mattered. Anxiety says, I'm trying to control the uncontrollable. And joy says, you are in alignment. When you learn to listen, really listen, you stop being a prisoner of emotion and become a translator of it. And here's the beautiful part. When you stop fearing your own emotions, you stop fearing others. You show up better in love, in work, in friendship. You don't shut down when things get heavy. You don't lash out when you feel misunderstood. You become a harbor, steady, deep, real. The man who feels fully, but isn't swayed blindly by what he feels, that's a Stoic. And that's a man the world needs more of. So the next time you're tempted to say, I'm fine, when you're not, pause. The next time you feel your jaw clench, your chest tighten, your mind spiral, pause. And choose the path of courage, not silence. Because emotions are not your enemy, but your refusal to face them, that's the battle you'll fight alone, until you choose to finally meet yourself. Number 3, overinvesting before it's earned. There's a quiet kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from betrayal, but from imbalance. You gave everything. Your time, your energy, your vulnerability. You showed up first, loved hardest, bent deepest. Not because she asked you to, but because you thought, maybe if you gave more, she'd stay longer. And maybe she did stay, for a while. But not because of the giving. She stayed because she could. And when she left, she didn't just take her presence with her. She took your sense of worth, too. Not because she was cruel, but because somewhere along the way, you forgot to ask a sacred question. Has she earned this part of me? The truth is, many men, especially those who lead with loyalty, overinvest far too soon. We confuse kindness with connection. We assume vulnerability guarantees reciprocity. We open the vault of our soul to someone who hasn't even proven they'll hold the key with care. Why? Because deep down, we want to be chosen. And we think that love is something we win by effort. But love, real love, cannot be forced by over-delivery. It is not a business deal. It is not a rescue mission. It is not a reward for self-sacrifice. Seneca wrote, "He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary." And that's exactly what overinvestment is, a prepaid sorrow, gifted to someone who never asked you to bleed for them in the first place. This is not about being cold. It's about being clear. A Stoic does not love less. He loves wisely. He understands that generosity, without discernment, becomes self-abandonment. He knows that to give deeply, one must first see clearly. Let me share with you a story about a man named Alex. Alex had a big heart, grew up in a family where love was expressed through service. His love language was doing. Acts of kindness, late-night phone calls, planning dates, paying bills when his partner was stressed. And when he met Maya, he gave everything. Within weeks, he was picking her up from work, covering her rent when she said she was between jobs, dropping plans with his friends just to be more available. He even lent her his car. But every time he gave more, her appreciation shrank. Her affection cooled. She became less responsive, more irritable. And the more distant she got, the more he gave, thinking he could patch the leaks with effort. Until one day, she ghosted him. No explanation, just silence. Alex was left broken and confused, not because he didn't try, but because he thought trying was enough. He thought love could be earned like a paycheck, with hours of emotional labor. But love, especially one grounded in mutual respect, doesn't work that way. What Alex missed, and what many men miss, is that giving before you've received clarity is not love. It's projection. It's placing someone on a pedestal they haven't earned. It's mistaking potential for reality. The Stoics call this a failure in judgment, because wisdom, their highest virtue, demands that we assess not just our intentions, but our timing. A Stoic man learns to pause, to evaluate, to say, is this person showing up for me the way I'm showing up for them? Or am I trying to fill a space that isn't mine to fill? And if the answer is no, he adjusts, not with resentment, but with responsibility. So how do you recalibrate when you've given too much? Start by acknowledging that your giving came from a good place, but that good intent, without wise boundaries, becomes harm. Then, reclaim your energy. Create space between what someone asks for and what you deliver. Wait, watch. Let their actions, not your expectations, set the pace. Build a habit of reflection. Ask, would I do this if I knew nothing would come back in return? If the answer is no, don't do it. Not out of punishment, but out of self-respect. Practice what the Stoics called temperance, moderation. Not to withhold love, but to give it in doses that reflect mutual commitment. And most importantly, remind yourself daily, you are not unlovable because someone did not receive your gift well. You are simply learning the sacred art of protecting what is precious, your time, your energy, your heart. There is power in restraint. There is dignity in patience. Marcus Aurelius said, just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. That includes doing right by yourself, protecting your peace, waiting for reciprocity, guarding your sacred efforts until someone proves they can meet them, not with empty words, but with equal action. So the next time your soul itches to overgive, pause. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to share it with someone who can hold it. And until then, hold it for yourself. Number 4, ignoring red flags out of attachment. Have you ever looked back on a relationship and thought, the signs were there, I just didn't want to see them? She said things that stung, but you laughed them off. She twisted the truth, but you gave her the benefit of the doubt. She pulled away, gave less, showed up inconsistently, but you kept showing up, hoping love would catch up to loyalty. This is not naivety. This is attachment dressed in hope. And it's one of the most costly mistakes a man can make. Ignoring red flags, not because he doesn't see them, but because he doesn't want them to be real. We stay not because it's right, but because it's familiar. We rationalize because we're afraid of the silence that comes after walking away, afraid of starting over, afraid of discovering that maybe we mistook fantasy for connection. The Stoics warned us about this form of self-deception. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. But what about the things we do not say to ourselves? What about the truths we refuse to whisper within? You see, the most dangerous red flags are not the loud ones, not the screaming fights or visible betrayals. It's the quiet erosion, the small comments that chip at your confidence, the way your joy dims around her, the slow shrinking of your truth just to keep the peace. It's the discomfort you feel when you express your needs and are met with silence. It's the shift in your gut when her actions never quite match her words. It's the constant second-guessing that grows louder than your intuition. And yet you stay, because she has potential, because it was good in the beginning, because you think if you just hold on a little longer, it'll return to what it once was. But my brother, that version of her, of you, no longer exists. Stoicism calls us to clarity, not to fantasy, not to future potential, but to what is, what stands before you today, what her actions reveal, not what her apologies promise. There's a subtle violence in ignoring red flags, the violence of self-abandonment. You slowly start betraying yourself to stay close to someone who's already pulling away. I once spoke to a man named Theo. He was in a 3-year relationship with a woman who was emotionally unpredictable. 1 week, warm and open. The next, distant and critical. She would disappear for days, then return with charm. He called it passionate. I called it a pattern. Theo stayed, thinking love was supposed to be hard, that his endurance was noble, that by loving her harder, he could heal what was never his to fix. But what he didn't see was this: the longer he stayed, the smaller he became. His goals faded. His friendships thinned. He became hyper-focused on managing her emotions, walking on eggshells, shrinking his truth just to avoid conflict. It wasn't love. It was survival disguised as devotion. When he finally left, he told me, "I thought leaving meant I failed. Now I see staying was the real failure." And that's the wisdom Stoicism offers us, not in bitterness, but in discernment. To see clearly, to love wisely, to choose truth over illusion, even when that truth hurts. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." The same applies here. If someone's inconsistency is hurting you, and you stay, you're participating in your own pain. So how do you break free? Start with brutal honesty. Ask yourself, if I met her today, with no history, would I choose this relationship? If I strip away the memories, the sex, the promises, what remains? Clarity or confusion? Next, write down what your soul has been trying to say. Not what your fear wants to protect. Not what your heart is trying to rescue, but what your inner stillness knows. And then, anchor yourself in values. A Stoic relationship is one rooted in shared virtues: honesty, presence, peace, commitment. Not chaos. Not compromise of character. Not breadcrumbing affection. When a red flag waves in your soul, don't grab it and try to make it a blanket. Let it be what it is: a signal, a mirror, a boundary line you are finally strong enough to hold. You are not unlovable because someone else failed to love you clearly. You are not broken because you walked away from confusion. You are, perhaps for the first time, choosing clarity over comfort. And in that space, in that breath, you begin to find yourself again. Because love is not meant to be a battlefield. It is meant to be a home. And if it feels more like war than peace, more like tension than trust, more like anxiety than joy, then maybe it's not love. Maybe it's time to walk. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in strength. And in silence so powerful, the world around you begins to shift. Number 5, making her the purpose instead of a partner. There is a quiet danger in love, a hidden temptation not many talk about. It doesn't begin with obsession. It begins with admiration, with late-night talks that feel like soul meetings, with laughter that unlocks a joy you didn't know was still in you, with moments so intimate you start thinking, maybe she's the reason. And then slowly, without realizing it, your life begins to orbit around her. You plan less for your future and more around her schedule. You show up for her more than you show up for your own mission. You start thinking not, what do I want from life, but what will make her stay? And this, my brother, is where many men lose themselves, not in heartbreak, but in devotion that was never meant to be all-consuming. It is the most tragic mistake of all, making her your purpose instead of your partner. The Stoics were clear. Our purpose is to live in accordance with nature, with reason, with virtue. Love, they said, is sacred, but it is never meant to replace our telos, our ultimate aim. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." So ask yourself, when did your ambition become so wrapped around someone else's existence that you stopped hearing your own call? When did your mornings shift from focused creation to checking if she texted? When did your energy stop being spent on building your path and start being spent on maintaining hers? This isn't about dismissing love. No, love is sacred. Connection is profound. Partnership is beautiful. But the moment your inner compass begins to spin around someone else's approval, someone else's needs, someone else's emotional weather, you are no longer walking your path. You are drifting, quietly, slowly, into forgetfulness. I met a man once, Jared. Smart, creative, driven. He had dreams of building something meaningful. A coaching brand, a book, a community for men. But then he met her, and she was captivating, soft in voice, sharp in spirit, unpredictable in all the ways that made him feel alive. Within months, his energy shifted. He started skipping gym sessions to be more available, put his writing projects on hold because she needed him emotionally, stopped going to his mastermind group, too tired, too distracted, too focused on managing the ups and downs of their relationship. At first, he called it love. But after a year, he looked around, and he didn't recognize his life. The things that once lit him up were now buried under compromise. His goals became foggy, his time fragmented, and his spirit quietly aching. He had made her his purpose, and in doing so, he lost himself. It took him months to rebuild, to untangle his identity from that dynamic, to remember that love, when pure, amplifies who you are, it doesn't erase it. The Stoics would say this: let her walk beside you, but never ahead of your mission. She can be your teammate, your muse, even your anchor in storms, but she must never become your compass. Because if your direction depends on someone else, you are not grounded. You are adrift. So what do you do if you realize you've placed her at the center of your world? First, forgive yourself. It came from love, not weakness. Second, return to yourself. Reignite your purpose. Reconnect with your calling. What did you love before you met her? What dreams did you hold sacred before her voice became louder than your own? Take one step back in that direction. Wake up early. Write, create, train, speak, build. Not for revenge, not for validation, but because your soul misses you, the man you were before you outsourced your meaning. And finally, redefine love, not as dependence, but as shared expansion. Let her be someone who walks beside you as you walk your truth, not someone who replaces it. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Maybe this moment, the moment you realize you've drifted, is your adversity. And maybe, just maybe, it's your moment to rise, to come home to your mission, to place love where it belongs, not as your purpose, but as a companion to it. And in doing so, you become a man not just worthy of love, but anchored enough to never lose himself in it again. The return to your own soul. By now, perhaps you've seen something of yourself in these words, not in judgment, but in recognition. Maybe you've chased validation, hoping her love would silence your self-doubt. Maybe you've worn emotional silence like armor, thinking it made you strong. Maybe you've poured yourself out before being asked, ignored the truths you felt in your gut, or made someone else your reason to rise in the morning. And if any of that rings true, I want to tell you something simple, but important. You are not broken. You are simply waking up. Waking up to the patterns that no longer serve you. Waking up to the wisdom that's been quietly waiting inside you. Waking up to the Stoic truth that the only approval you need is your own, that the only control worth mastering is over yourself, and that the only purpose strong enough to carry love is the one that doesn't depend on it. The path of a Stoic man is not cold or distant or hardened. It is tender in discipline, fierce in clarity, gentle in presence, and above all, grounded in virtue. And if you've wandered far from that path, know this: every step back to yourself counts. Every boundary you hold with kindness. Every emotion you meet with reflection. Every time you choose clarity over fantasy, purpose over attachment, stillness over chaos, you are returning. You are becoming the kind of man who does not need to be loud, because his energy speaks before he does. The kind of man whose peace is contagious, whose presence is respected not for dominance, but for depth. Marcus Aurelius said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." So let every mistake become your teacher. Let every heartbreak become a clearing. Let every loss become a gateway, not to bitterness, not to withdrawal, but to presence, to power, to the kind of love that begins and ends in self-respect. And if this video spoke to something in you, if it helped you see even one part of yourself more clearly, don't keep that to yourself. Leave a comment. Tell your story, not for likes, but for liberation, for the brother who's still stuck in his silence. Like this video if it moved you. Subscribe to Stoic now if you want more reflections like this. Not because I asked you to, but because something in your soul asked you to stay. And if you take nothing else from this video, take this. You don't need her back. You don't need to be chosen. You just need to remember who you are when no one else is watching. And then live from there. We'll see you in the next one.